Good evening, everybody. It is 6 o'clock, and this is the regularly scheduled council workshop for the month of October 2021. Lori, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Cameron?
Here.
Vice Mayor Stone?
Here.
Councilmember Brandon? Councilmember Prince?
Here.
Councilmember Young?
Here.
May I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, first item is the presentation regarding the design concept for the commercial areas of the village. Mr. Allen, do you want to lead this off?
Yeah, so as part of our ongoing conversations about the corridor project, I've asked Treasure Coast Planning Council to come and give a brief presentation on maybe their projects and what experience they have with the corridor project. So tonight with us tonight is Mr. Thomas Lanahan, who's the director of the Treasure Coast Planning Council, and via Zoom is Mr. Dana Little, who is the who's a planner for them as well. So I think do you want to start off? Do you want Dana to? Brad, while he's coming up, can you unmute Dana?
Hi, good evening. I'm happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting us to come and speak with you about some of the services that the council can provide for you. Dana's going to provide a kind of an overview of how the Charrette process works and some specific thoughts about Tequesta. Some of you know, I'm sure, we've done some work here in the past, and we really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed working with you all. It's nice to be back here in this beautiful council chambers. So Dana will be the primary presenter. I'm here as well to help out and answer some questions and whatnot. So we have our virtual presence here. So I'm going to go ahead and take a seat, and Dana, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. This disembodied voice is Dana Little. I am the Urban Design Director for the Regional Planning Council. I want to thank Mr. Allen and you, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members for accommodating me virtually at such short notice. I fell under the weather this weekend, and then in discussing this evening's presentation with Mr. Allen, we thought in an abundance of caution it would be best if I was just piped in, as I'm getting tested again tomorrow. So, strange days that we're in. Mr. Allen, should I take over the screen at this point?
You should, if you will.
And this is where things get interesting.
We got you.
Okay, great. I'd also like to thank Tom Lanahan, our director, for being there this evening. It's good to have a personal presence there. While I set this up, I think we're good to go. I mentioned to Jeremy when we met a number of weeks ago, the first charrette that I ever did was actually in Tequesta back in 1989. And you know, it's a lovely area, and you know, if you're not in and around the area, it's frequently. It's kind of a hidden gem, and you know, as I met with Mr. Allen and then with the Vice Mayor earlier, and we discussed some of the issues or some of the items or elements that you would like to discuss and explore. You know, I think identity. What is the identity of your village going forward? And as you see, as you become, fortunately or unfortunately, more discovered going into the future, you know, how can you control your physical destiny, as well as the identity, and maintain, you know, enhance the things that make you great already, but maintain them as well. I've got a little slideshow to go through, try to highlight some of the initial observations and what we see or what we understand to be some of the issues to be tackled for the planning process, but then also spend a little bit of time and talk about the process itself. For those of you that don't know, we are one of 10 regional planning councils, the Treasure Coast. Statewide, we have 4 counties: we're Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, and Indian River counties. 52 municipalities within those 4 counties, and we work exclusively with the public sector. whether it be counties, villages, local governments, etc. And in a nutshell, we provide technical assistance to local governments in various facets. It's law enforcement training, brownfields assessment, small revolving loan funds. And I'm fortunate enough to run the Urban Design Studio, which is made up of architects, many of which are from the University of Miami. And I'd like to, as I go through the presentation, I'll talk about that a little bit more. This is an aerial view of your village. You see County Line Road to the north. This is the FEC Old Dixie corridor here as it sweeps down across the intercoastal, across the inlet. Federal Highway, of course, here. Beach Road. And then almost in the geographic center is Tequesta Drive, then leading out to the island here. You know, I think some of you probably know this. We worked with previous Mayor Brennan, former Mayor Brennan, quite a bit, and the council on the lane elimination project for Federal Highway. I understand that there's, you know, probably differing opinions depending upon whether you live in the village or you just drive through the village, but you know, I think that this is a great image to show because you can imagine that before the bike lanes and the buffering were put in, that was all just travel lane asphalt. And really, a large part of that project, I think, was how do you frame, you know, the front door of your community? What is it that, what are the components that are missing? You know, has the highway been over-engineered over the years? Do you need that many lanes? And if you don't, how can you repurpose that real estate for your residents? And also, it shows a commitment on the council's part to improving the quality of life for residents in the village. So I bring this up because we're very proud of the work. Kim Delaney was the project manager of our office on that. We're very proud of the work that you all accomplished. We know it was not easy, but you held strong. And I think that what you've done is now set the framework for more responsible redevelopment going forward along the corridor. And there are a few redevelopment opportunities. You know, I was surprised to see a couple of large parcels out there. I don't know the ownership of this or even what the zoning is at this point or if there's anything proposed for it. But, you know, redevelopment isn't just the tearing down of existing buildings and rebuilding, but, you know, finding those vacant land opportunities. And a big part of the planning process would be identifying, you know, key catalytic or sites likely to redevelop, and then testing the vision on those sites. Paradise Park, we've heard a lot about Paradise Park. It's very interesting, centrally located, not in the ownership of the village. And what is the future of Paradise Park? And Main Street as well. I find it interesting because when you're on, oh forgive me, this is Bridge Road. Yes, it's right there, Bridge Road. There's a beautiful presence of the park along Bridge Road. However, you know, when you approach it from Tequesta Drive, unless you know where you're going or you know where it is, it's very easy to pass by a number of times, which I've done in looking for it. So going forward, you know, what is the future of that area, of that nucleus of the city, that heart of the village? And those are things that should be discussed and explored. And what tools do you have to control or shape the future of that area? Mr. Allen brought up the South Cypress corridor as, you know, the sort of industrial corridor of the village, and I traveled it a number of times. I have to tell you, it was the most interesting and beautiful industrial corridor I think I've ever seen. It's really something with the slight bends and chicanes in the road. Very unique, already what appears to be a very active mix and blend of uses. Lovely landscaping. I was very impressed. I think that this is worthy of discussion because you have something unique here. You have some of those in-town light industrial uses as well as some of the, you know, newer interesting type of, you know, be it Pilates or those type of neighborhood uses that are here. And so how do you keep a balance? And that's something that we're discussing with a lot of cities. West Palm Beach, for instance, has a great industrial district right down the street from where I live. And, you know, we've we voiced some concern to the city about piling too much housing in there, because while housing's great, if you get out of balance, residents don't like, cabinet makers banging on hammers and pieces of wood all day. So it's important to keep a balance and have a vision for who you want to be in that district going forward. Mr. Allen also told me about Tequesta Park up on County Line Road. I don't know what the issues are here, if there are any serious issues, but I've included it maybe just as a reminder to bring up or to discuss. And then there's the FEC Dixie Highway corridor, which is expansive, it's long. Are there ways to improve that aesthetically, etc.? And the community character, in meeting with some of your residents and your vice mayor and Mr. Allen, what struck me is that there seems to be, it seems to me, and I could be off base, but the village might be at a turning point or a pivotal point now where what is your identity going forward? As you have growth and redevelopment, what's it gonna look like? What's the scale of it gonna be? What's the character gonna be? You've got some beautiful residential streets. This building to the bottom left I find so interesting. It's sort of a 60s or 70s modern, in quotes, building. 3 stories, mixed use it looks like. Is that an aesthetic or a scale that you want to carry forward? It's very much sort of an old Florida vibe, if you will, if you let me borrow a term from my teenage daughter. And then the residential complex just east of Village Hall. It has a mid-century modern feel in terms of the architecture. That may or may not be desirable going forward, but through a process like this, you can start to identify what the community's appetite is for architecture, excuse me, and style. We spoke about this at length, Tom and Mr. Allen and I, that we want to be careful. As much as I've tried in my professional career to regulate talent, you really can't do that. So you need to figure out ways to encourage good architecture, the aesthetic that you like, without being overbearing. And so there are strategies on how to do that. But as I mentioned to Mr. Allen, providing visuals is a really, images, providing lots and lots of images of who you want to be are the best way, I think, to provoke an image and to have an image. Now, the image on the bottom left there, I'm not certain that's who you want to be going forward. I don't know. That could be anywhere on Federal Highway. But, not to be disparaging, but, architecture matters. And so our team typically is made up primarily of architects, as I mentioned. And I'll go through a roster of the team in a moment. But if architecture and style and character and scale is important to you, that's something that we can definitely focus on. And then the images that we developed during the Charrette process, this is in North Palm Beach, starts to illustrate how redevelopment addresses the street, provides parking in the rear. This, as a very, very simple diagram, starts to give some instruction about building heights and building intensity. And then these drawings, in turn, inform the revisions to their land development regulations that they're still actually completing in North Palm Beach. And some of those include, some minute details too, in terms of frontage standards. Like what does a good storefront look like? Why do you want to have that little wall there between the window and the ground? That evokes a certain style of architecture. If the windows extend all the way to the ground, that's a different style of architecture in terms of a more modern approach. But ways to ensure that whatever the community vision is, it gets codified at some point and turns into implementable strategies. So I want to quickly go through the Charrette process. For those of you that don't know, the Charrette is a term. It's actually a word in French that means cart. And way back when in the École des Beaux-Arts in the 19th century Paris, the students were so intense drawing their final projects that as they got put on the charrette or the cart, they would run behind the cart and keep drawing. And I can tell you I've had that experience. But what we love about the Charrette process is that it's all-inclusive, number one. Number two, you're able to tailor your team. You're able to tailor your team of professionals for the specific needs of the community. And I'll tell you, it's not just Tom and Kim and Dana that are doing the Charrette. probably a good 80 to 90% of our team are typically private sector consultants, most of them sole practitioners or they have their own offices. And we've built a stable, if you will, of these consultants over the years. As I mentioned to Mr. Allen in our meeting, I've had the pleasure and benefit of working with some of the most talented people in the world, really humbling. But many of them cannot have a conversation with a member of the public, and that's not acceptable in the type of work that we do. So over the years, we've been able to hone a team that really, really works well with the public and the community and shows respect and listens carefully. We're not pollsters, we're not there to just check boxes and say, okay, well, the majority of your residents want this. We try to give some very thoughtful consideration to things that may and may not work. But it's very important that everyone is involved in the Charrette process. And being that the fact that we don't really come from, most of us don't really come from planning backgrounds, we've advanced our planning from this, your standard sort of future land use map with a bunch of different colored boxes and blobs, to a level of detail where you can actually start to see building footprints, where new buildings go, where new streets go, to a level of detail like this, excuse me, where you can actually start to count street trees if that's your desire. In this case, this is a new street in a new community, and those houses with the red roofs are all new, you know, a change of building type around the central green there. So whatever level of detail we need to get into to address your issues or concerns, we can. And also, three-dimensional visual representations is very important. Not only the classic hand-drawn renderings, which we still love, but these days, this is South Dixie in West Palm Beach. Some of the computer renderings that our team is able to produce are really magnificent in helping to truly visualize transformation over time within your community. We like to say there's 1,000 benefits to doing a community-based planning effort. I'm not going to read all these to you. I mentioned, though, that it brings people together. It's an opportunity to protect your character and form. Your citizens in participating, they become authors of the plan. Therefore, they want to, they may not agree with every aspect of it, but if they've got skin in the game, that means that they want to protect it and defend it over time. You know, we did the downtown master plan for Delray Beach, Atlantic Avenue back in 2000. And I will tell you, and sometimes it's a little bit embarrassing, but people in the community will still show up to council meetings and you know, raise this old dog-eared paper copy of the master plan and say, we decided this 20 years ago. It helps you to achieve desired and expected outcomes. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about how you implement these things. It also provides a level of, I think, certainty to the development community that the village of Tequesta has its act together. They know who they are, they know where they want to go, and they'll help you get your project built and approved. But, you know, part of it's going to be on their terms, because that's the terms of the community. And also these things are very fun. You know, they set sort of a marker in the ground that people remember back to when we all got together to do this. Quickly, we like to start by establishing a host committee of residents. Typically, that's a group that's identified by you council members. And they help us with logistics. They also help us identify who we should be conducting stakeholder interviews with. We start with an opening presentation, and then we go into the design workshop, which I'm going to go over in detail now. The host committee, as I mentioned, will typically establish them a month to 3 months in advance. They are our key tentacles into the community, and they really help us out a lot with outreach. We want to make sure you get as much participation in this process as possible, so that it's airtight and you can avoid critique later that, well, you only had 5 people in the public there. How can that be, you know, full representation? And then they become champions of the plan, which is very important going forward. We'll typically conduct between 20 and 40 one-hour individual interviews. We'll start with you, mayor, vice mayor, and council members. We'll talk to the staff. But then we like to conduct lots of interviews with neighborhood leaders, any business leaders in the community, investors, folks of that nature that can provide us data and input, reconnaissance for what's going on. It's also an opportunity for us to demystify the process and explain to the community what it is we're up to and why it's important that they be there. We'll kick off typically with a Saturday workshop. This happens to have been a charrette that was well attended in Lakeland a few years ago now. But we'll find a centrally located location where we've got ample room for, 50, 100, 150 people hopefully. We'll start with an opening presentation, introductions, and we'll give a presentation that talks about why we are here, who we are, why we're here, and what are some of the issues that we like to discuss during the day, and maybe even how have some of your neighboring communities dealt with similar issues. We typically work on that Saturday for 3 or 4 hours at tables, drawing on aerial photographs. I think that we would look at the entire village in this case, east of the Loxahatchee. And this is an opportunity for folks that don't normally sit across the table from one another to discuss and basically brainstorm thoughts. This street's too fast, what are we gonna do? We really need a park over here, how are we gonna do that? I'd really like these buildings on Main Street to look this way. And honestly, we let folks go. We'll have a facilitator, one of our team members at each one of the tables, just to keep things flowing. And if there's any questions, and to work with them, not to direct them in their ideas. We always have food. It's very important to feed your team. And your team in this case is the community. So we want to be able to have a venue where we can feed folks and have them continue working through lunch. And then after lunch, after a few hours of drawing and putting their ideas on paper, we ask that 1 or 2 members of each of the tables, not team members, not from Treasure Coast, but from the community, stand up and present their team's ideas up on the board and present it back to the rest of the group. This is really important because folks that may have, fundamental differences, you realize that, when people get up and start to talk publicly about the things that are important to them and the issues that they want to have addressed, you start to find really strong threads of consensus, even among folks that might normally not get along very well. It's also a lot of fun, and it's an opportunity for people within your community to sort of be memorialized, again, as authors of the plan going forward. And I believe this sincerely, we always encourage kids to participate. They have some of the best ideas. We forget. Kids are short and they don't drive, and so they've got a different perspective on your village than we do. And they remind us that, hey, a water fountain once in a while might be nice, or shade trees are really good, So we always encourage having a kids' table, at least one. And then we set up in the studio. We will set up a studio. In this case, we've been asked to put together a proposal, or at least this discussion, look at a charrette for 5 days, which would go Saturday through Wednesday. The classic charrette goes 7 days. That, of course, has more expense, but you're also a smaller community, so I think that we can be efficient in that. We'll set up a studio within the study area, and we'll work from 9 in the morning till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and there's full-time public access to the studio. This is very important. We want your citizens to feel comfortable to just pop by at any time and chat with us about something. Maybe they forgot an idea that they wanted to present on Saturday. Or some folks, I tell you, just like to come and sit and chat and watch really talented people draw. It's interesting. But this really starts to build a rapport between the team and your community. And that is so important because that's where trust is made. And as I said before, we can't have team, that's why our team is who they are, why we've worked with them for so long. Because they've got to be able to work and have a pleasant conversation with your community at the same time. And then we'll work in the studio from days 2 through 5, which is on Wednesday, and then we'll do a presentation of what we call work in progress, which is exactly what it sounds like. We'll say, okay, but we met with you on Saturday. These are all the ideas we heard. This is what we were able to develop over the course of the last 5 days. Are we going in the right direction? If not, please redirect us, or if so, tell us to keep going. But this is really the first opportunity for us to check off the direction with the community. Our team, as I mentioned, are architects, urban designers. If need be, we can have transportation engineers, retail consultants, economists. Like I said, we are fortunate, I'm really fortunate to have worked with a broad spectrum of private sector experts over the years that we can draw upon, depending upon what their particular needs are. 10 to 12 weeks after the work in progress presentation, we'll come back with a draft report, as well as if desired, a draft update presentation, and then we'll give a final presentation, at which point, hopefully, we would, like to see the plan adopted, or at least some formal way accepted. Different cities and villages and towns have different perspectives on that. But you want to have some formal action taken. So again, you send a message to the developing community that we have a vision, and you also send a message to your staff that they are now authorized to start to discuss some of the ideas. We'll put together a detailed schedule for you, which identifies where the host committee meetings are relative to your village council meetings, relative to any particular holidays, etc. The schedule will also identify when our pre-charrette interviews are happening, the host committees, and you can see down there in green, the public workshop. In this case, the North Palm Beach, starting on Saturday, going all the way through Friday. And that's it. I appreciate your time. Tom and I are both here, me virtually, of course, to try to answer any questions. But we really do appreciate the opportunity to discuss this with you, and look forward to hopefully working together going forward. Thank you.
Dana and Tom, I want to thank you both for being here. Let me open it up for the council to see if you've got any questions or things you would like to put forth at this point. Any thoughts?
Is there a proposal? Are you guys still putting that together? Or is that something, Jeremy, that you have?
Sure. I think we've had a preliminary conversation with the village manager, but we wanted to come in front of the council and kind of explore with you, here's some initial ideas and here's some potential scope for this. But we wanted to, before going through and formalizing it, really get some feedback from you all. Are we on the right track? Is this the kind of thing that you would like us to engage with you on, that sort of thing? So we can, if you'd like to proceed, we can turn that into, the full agreement and get underway.
I think it's very in-depth, and I don't know that we've thought this process is going to be as in-depth as maybe some of the things that they've brought up in the presentations. I think we need to decide how in-depth we want to go so they can properly put together a proposal.
The process is in depth, or do you think the
No.
multiple locations?
Yes, not the process.
So
I think the
question for
process is similar to what we've been talking about, but yeah, the other areas and locations is a little more in-depth than what we originally were thinking.
So my question based on that is, would you agree or disagree that having multiple locations within a municipality and doing multiple geographical situations, would that cause a problem, or would that be actually good to do an in-depth version? Or do you think it should be segmented?
Actually, I might ask Dana to answer that if he can.
I think that's a good question. All things are interrelated ultimately. And so, I always tell a city, they'll say, well, this is a big project. And I say, well, listen, the master plan isn't a project. The master plan is a whole bunch of projects. Some of them with higher priorities than others. Some of them are part of the dream wish list off in the future. Some of them are critical and need to be funded immediately. Some of them are policy decisions that need to be made. Some of them are procedural issues that need to be made. So I wouldn't be too concerned about having too many issues for us to contemplate. That won't necessarily affect, what the budget is or anything. By the way, we have not submitted a formal proposal yet, but when I last spoke to Jeremy, I think that I mentioned that the numbers that I've run for a 5-day charrette on-site, all in, including, if we need to put anybody up in hotels and things, will probably run about $145,000. That's soup to nuts from beginning to end. Now, one thing that we haven't discussed, and the irony is not lost on me or you, hopefully, at this, but, you know, we're very excited. We haven't done a charrette in person in 2 years. And it's very hard to have the same degree of connection and impact with the community when you workshop and have virtual charrettes. To be able to sit across the table from a group of people and have lunch and talk about issues and hear their story, how do they move to Tequesta, this type of thing. There's no replacing that. However, we may start to think about if there need to be virtual options. The last thing we want is for one of these processes to be perceived even as a super spreader event. So we need to be smart about that.
Bruce, did you? I think when we started this process, I think the focus was on the commercial areas of the village, particularly because we have one building that's being proposed on US 1. Obviously, we have Cypress. By the way, the Cypress corridor you referenced, about 3/4 of that is in Jupiter, so only the northern section of that is actually within Tequesta's boundaries. And then, of course, we have Bridge Road. So the thought was, from a commercial standpoint, we're looking at the likelihood of activity happening on US 1 with the potential of a new building. There's a potential for redevelopment along that section. That's probably got the highest potential for developers to come in and maybe acquire some old properties and look to upgrade. Then we have the Bridge Road area, we have the Cypress Road area, and then there's a little component in the north section of town. So I think, again, that was the motivation, that we have people coming to us, and you said something I think that was very wise, which is we don't want to take away the creativity of architects and people of that ilk, but we want to give them some parameters or some guidelines in terms of what it is that the community would like to see. And we did talk about the charrette process for all the reasons you mentioned. It was very important to have a strong community involvement, a strong community voice. And for one of the reasons you mentioned when you referenced Delray, which is as you go through and you develop this process, if there isn't strong community buy-in, then future councils could just basically set this aside. If we've done this right, and there's very, very strong community buy-in, and anyone who's sitting at this dais knows that, then I think there's going to be respect for the process, a respect for the outcome, and a desire and a willingness, obviously, to follow that forward. Not that it can't ever change at some point in the future. As you said, you get 20, 25 years out, it might be time for a refresher. But you want to know that you have something that has some lasting element to it, at least in the near and intermediate term. So I think in terms of developing a proposal, as Molly said, you mentioned a few other elements here, but I think our initial focus was really getting our arms around and like I said, providing some guidance in these commercial areas so that we maintain, the character and the ambiance of the village, however the community, ultimately perceives that.
I would say.
Mayor, if I may, we can very easily focus almost entirely on the commercial areas if that's the desire. I was just putting up some of the different items that have come up in conversation, but we can be as flexible and as focused on what you see the key issues being.
Yeah, I was going to say, my main focus is that I believe that the village does have an identity, but I don't believe that our architecture and our zoning matches that identity. And I think that's across the board of the village of Tequesta. And so I would be in favor of looking at all the areas and doing it now, getting a bunch of feedback from residents that have moved into the area in the last 10 years, and really get a good identity of how we want to look going forward, and get that input from the villages, from the residents, and have it come from the residents and not from us. And if they can do it, and it's not additional cost to add, significant additional cost to add certain characteristics, even like Tequesta Park, where we're going to be talking about an opportunity there, I think it's a great opportunity to take advantage of it, to get the feedback from the residents to identify what our identity should be.
I don't disagree with that, and because Dana touched on like even residential, and I know since I've been on council, I've been saying we need to do a whole master plan of the village as a whole. So I am definitely a proponent of that, but my mindset, the intent of why we got here today was just for more of the aesthetic, kind of commercial, kind of high level. So it's kind of going in another direction, which I like, because I'm a proponent of the master plan, but just why this was on the agenda, how we got to this presentation was originally just for like kind of some aesthetic direction, an architectural direction for mainly US one. So I'm for both. I really like the idea of a master plan, but I just want to be clear, I didn't come here tonight on this agenda item thinking like a whole master plan.
Yeah, I think, I don't disagree. I guess it depends what you mean by master plan. I mean, when we start talking about, I mean, we've got an area that's fairly well developed, you've got homes in place, you've got the parks already kind of in place. We're talking about obviously trying to acquire Paradise, that would be an addition. There's not much opportunity beyond that, I don't think, most areas for parks. But when you say a master plan, when you've already got a very well-developed community, like, I'm questioning, I guess, what do you mean exactly by master plan? Are you talking about, when you talk about residential, for example, are we all of a sudden going to try and change or determine or dictate to people what kind of style of homes they can build? I mean, I think we got to be real careful when we talk about what do we mean. Master plan is a very nebulous term. So when you say we want a master plan, I guess the question I have is exactly what do you mean by that? I know what we've talked about in terms of the commercial areas. We know where our parks area, we've talked about, opportunities to develop those further. We've talked about the redevelopment that happens to lie within those commercial areas. And some of those could be quasi-residential as well as commercial, so that would be inclusive in that overall review. But I guess I'm looking for what other elements, when you talk about master plan, what are you looking for?
For me, I'm looking at US 1, I'm looking at Tequesta Drive, I'm looking at Tequesta Park, Old Dixie, and Cypress are the main areas that I think that we can identify, and we can prioritize which ones, as a council, which ones we should look at a high priority. But those are my areas that I think we should do charrettes to encompass those ideas. Even Cypress, you mentioned Jupiter. Why can't we reach out to Jupiter and see if they would want to participate?
We can.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we can't.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure Dana understood that
No, I know. Yeah.
there's a good chunk of that area that isn't ours. I mean, I think,
And same with US 1.
yeah,
So
I mean, Bridge Road, US 1, Cypress, Old Dixie, I mean, there's not much of Old Dixie that's commercial except for the very southern end. Again, it's already developed.
But we can improve it to make it more.
No, but again, I think that falls within those general commercial areas where we're looking to provide some guidance.
I think there was some incredible foresight within the village years ago when you look at Tequesta Country Club and the oak trees that were planted there.
Mhm.
Someone had to make that decision.
Right.
And that has added enormous amount of value to the area. It's taking that type of thought process, doing it now, listening to the residents, and getting that vision so that when new people come in, they want to change something, they change it to that vision that was already agreed upon. If there's new funding or grants available, bam, we know exactly where we put that oak tree.
Well, I know we've talked about landscaping as being part of this
Yeah, and
overall
this
as well, so.
kind of ties back to the strategic plan that I felt had a bunch of items on it that seemed piecemeal, and if we had a master plan, I think we could better implement, not all at the same time, but yeah, you have a plan, so as they get implemented, you follow that plan. So that goes throughout the whole village. So I'm not saying, not houses per se, but you can say landscaping, sidewalks, pedestrian connectivity. They brought up Paradise Park. What's happening there? How do we connect that better to the village for people to get access to? So that's what I'm talking about, like master plan. And it goes back to the strategic plan that has all these different items on it.
Okay, I understand what you're saying. I mean, again, I think some of these things are going to move more quickly than they are. So for example, Paradise Park is something that's going to likely be decided in the next 6 months. So some of these elements will happen, and then they can fit that within the overall plan as things unfold. But I understand what you're saying. So again, I think, you know, the commercial areas obviously are a high priority if you're looking for a priority, and I think the vice mayor laid it out too. He did add Old Dixie to that element as well. And to the extent that we can have, you know, we can maybe broaden the conversation when we have folks here to talk about some of the other elements that they both mentioned. I think that would be great, but I think we've really got to get our arms around the commercial element. Because again, that's going to happen more quickly, and that's where we want to make sure we've got community buy-in, community guidance, and when people come in, and because we've set up a process where we've said to developers, if you're looking at something, you want to bring it to us, you can bring it to the council early on to say, okay, here's what we're thinking about, here's what this might look like. You know, they'll ask us for our feedback, but if they've also got this overall plan with this overall guidance, that's going to help them immeasurably.
That's the nice thing about the Charrette report, is that provides something you can make available to them, they can study. And
Exactly.
Then, oh, okay, you know, before they even put pen to paper the first time.
Okay.
It lays out kind of what your visions are. Good process.
Bruce, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I'm just taking it all in.
Anything else, guys?
Just one more question, because I looked at the North Palm Beach project you guys did, because I was told that was similar, it was provided to us. From the time you go through this whole process and present your final plan to say, then the village has to incorporate maybe new ordinances and things in the code, what's the time frame you generally see from the Charrette process or this whole planning process to actually being able to implement?
Sure, and I'll have Dana answer that if he's still there.
That's always a good question. And I'm going to try to answer it honestly and not evade the question, but I mean, the process itself is probably 10 months, 10 to 12 months from the time that we actually, you know, get started and assemble a host committee, have our kickoff meeting, et cetera, to the time that we do our final presentation with you. However, excuse me, I mean this, depending upon, you know, what the issues are, implementation can start happening through that process. That's a conversation you can be having with applicants who come and say, hey, look, we've got this going on. Granted, we haven't changed our codes yet or whatever, but you know, this is the direction that the community wants to go in. As far as like changing policy, as far as say, if a recommendation was to update your land development regulations for some reason, or maybe create, you know, some sort of incentive program for something, I don't know, I'm just making this up. That would come afterwards. But I do believe that you can start to, so the question of when does implementation start is kind of a tricky one. There's policy decisions, there's adoption dates, there's ordinances, especially if you're changing your codes, etc. But if you can get the word out, and you can start having these conversations with your applicants about what's happening, you know, implementation, you can start to build a groundswell through the process.
Thank you.
Sure.
Do we have any comments from folks in the audience this evening?
I have one from Pat Watkins.
Okay, Ms. Watkins?
Good evening, everyone. Pat Watkins, 167 River Drive. I'm having a tough time understanding why you all feel the need for this at this point in time. First of all, the village is so small. We're almost completely built out. The area you're talking about, I don't know how much change you see coming immediately, especially at any kind of cost like that, when you're looking at so many other things at one time. I just don't understand the timing, for one thing. You have a very active planning and zoning board you could utilize. We used to have a community appearance board. You might want to revitalize and try going that route. Maybe you just need some sort of general design concept in hand through your building department that would do enough to keep you from getting something that was outrageous, but didn't quite get into this expansive kind of a thing. To me, the one thing we really need desperately is better signage for our businesses. It's very difficult up there in US 1 to see anything, especially the ones that are set back, that sort of thing. But just for the time being, in the relative scheme of things here, with looking at whether you do or do not do Paradise Park, or you do or do not do Tequesta Park, but you've already got the rec building and all that going. You need a lot of infrastructure work now and going forward. So it's just a concern for me, is this really a need at this point? Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I mean, you raised a good point. I think there was a consensus among the council that, particularly with this proposed building for US 1, that before another building went up, that we maybe take a look at it as a community as to, again, to maybe provide some guidelines and some thoughts from just beyond the five of us as to, what that might look like and how to make sure that it's in keeping with the character of the community. And, even on this council, there's differing points of view on that. So I think the thought was, let's get some, community input. And it started out initially with a focus on the commercial areas, because that's where the feeling was we're going to see new buildings, we're going to see potentially redevelopment. And I've said this before, government can sometimes be very slow to act. The private sector tends to move much more quickly. So if we really want to have, again, an impact on what happens with commercial development, then it may not be a bad idea to move forward on that element of it. I understand the desire to expand it into other areas as well, but I think it's the commercial arena where there was a feeling that we needed to, establish some guidelines and some parameters. You're right. I mean, we have planning and zoning. This council could weigh in on it. We can obviously look for some citizen input, but I think the idea of a more comprehensive, more intensive charrette process, and if we could do it in a reasonable period of time, that this could be a good use. Now, the cost that came out this evening is a little higher, I think, than what we've talked about in the past, and that obviously would be a consideration as well, because you're right, we've got a lot of other things going on. But I'll let the other council members speak to this as well. But I think that was the original rationale as to why we wanted to take a look at this.
We just had a developer come in and purchase an old piece of property on the ocean. They developed it and sold it for close to $175 million. They're not going to be the only one. There's going to be others. There are people coming in to develop this area because it is great, because it is unique, because it is small, and that's what we need to protect. Or you're going to have more. That's my concern.
And I understand that, although
I'll add to that. I saw a developer go look at another piece of property in the Tequesta Seaport area to look at buying an area over there and developing that. It's only a matter of time.
Yeah.
Well, what is the charrette going to do differently than what our current building codes and guidelines and stuff that are in place now? Are we looking at it as an ability to be able to control the development of the style of architecture and stuff that potential developers may want to come into town and do? Because, when we initially started talking about this, I made mention of a charrette that was done up in Central Florida where I came from, and we spent about $80,000 or $90,000 on it back then, and we never really used it and put it into place. And I made that comment when this first came out a month or so ago. So I'm still not 110%. I've been very quiet listening to everybody tonight, so I'm still not 100%, in favor of spending this kind of money moving forward. I just don't know if we're really going to be able to benefit financially enough for the expense for what it can give us, what we already don't have in place. We can still get public opinion like we do on every council meeting about any type of new facility that is proposed to the village. So, I mean, it's not like that, the public is open at the workshops, at the meetings and stuff every week, every month. So we can always get the public input. So I'm still not 110% sold on, or 100% sold on for that matter.
And you make some good points. There are limits to what we can or cannot do in terms of forcing people or putting constraints on development. Mm-hmm. So, for example, on the beach, there's a 11-story limit already there. Mm-hmm. On that beachfront property, we can't change that. It'll be a deprivation of private property rights.
So I talked to an attorney, and I think you can do that.
We can try, and you would be sued, and we would have to defend that.
And you'll win.
You may or may not win. I mean, I think
if that's the direction we want to go, I'm not saying that is, but I do think that is possible.
Okay, maybe, I mean, that's a legal question. I know the village attorney maybe has a little different perspective on that, but what I'm saying is there are limits on what we can or can't do. I think originally, as you indicated, Bruce, the intent was to provide an overall vision, get the community input into it so that there was strong community buy-in, and we would provide guidelines and still allow for creativity. I think that was the overall desire, not to come in with some type of plan where all of a sudden we're regulating every element. I don't see the role of government to regulate every element. But I do see it to preserve character and the ambience of the community. I said this at the last meeting. Somebody brought up like Hilton Head, South Carolina, where everything looks exactly the same. It is the most boring place you could ever want to go to, and our residents would never stand for that. So this was an attempt to see if we could come to a community consensus, which is not going to be easy to do, by the way, because you're going to have a lot of varying opinions on what does or does not look good and what people do or do not want. But see if we could have some consensus and then provide some guidelines. I think that was, as I recall, the original intent, again, particularly with the commercial corridors, because that's where the activity was going to be.
And I agree with the original intent. Like I said, that we've gotten here, like I think, down a path which was not the original intent, which was commercial corridor, like a menu of design guidelines that, architects and developers can choose
And
from.
it would include landscaping, it would include signage, it would include those various elements. And I agree with Councilman Prince. I don't want to spend $150,000 on this. I think if we can come to an agreement or a consensus on maybe something a little more limited at this point at a more reasonable cost, I think that would be a good first step forward. I don't see us spending that kind of money at this juncture.
In the time frame too, I mean, you're talking about developing something that's going to be put in place for many years to come, 10, 15, 20 years, or whatever the case may be, or whatever the limitations and stuff are on that type of change. But, you're talking about 2 years really, or a year and a half to really get it put in place, because, you're going to have to start changing some of the building codes, some of the landscaping code and stuff. So, I mean, I know we can do that relatively quickly, but he's talking 10 to 12 months before, we're a month away from getting in place. Let's just say it's going to be a year before he ever does his final presentation. And then you've got several months after that before you can actually ever get everything put into, make the changes and stuff that we decide to move forward with, should that happen. So, you're looking at a year and a half before you're actually going to get it finalized for round numbers and stuff. And it's going to last for an extremely long time. But are we in such a state that we feel like we need to make these type of changes? I mean, it's been this way now for a long time, and I'm proud of the sea glass project and stuff that was done out there on the beach. I think it was a real asset to the village and stuff, and we're all excited about the revenue and stuff that it's going to generate us. And as long as we have that type of architecture, from these individual architects with these great minds of vision, then I think that we'll be pretty good shape moving forward, allowing these people to bring their vision to the village, and then we can approve or not approve it, just like we have been doing and stuff. That's my take on it. Right now we just, to spend $80,000 or $100,000 or $145,000 on it, there's a lot, we're scrambling to pay for some other stuff. We took money out of our discretionary funds so we could move forward with some vision on this other park and stuff that we're doing. So, if we had the money and stuff, then, maybe so, I would say, all right, let's go ahead and move forward. I think it's a great idea, but we don't.
Mr. Bradford.
Thomas Bradford, 44 Chestnut Trail. I wanted to remind Councilman Prince that the original impetus behind doing a charrette was when it started to be discussed through public comment at your council meetings, that people were concerned about the architecture and the lack of urban design principles in Tequesta, that some of you, including you, were saying, well, it'll take 3 years to get all of this done. And so I was one of the ones that came forward and said, not if you do a charrette. A charrette will give you a compacted, focused process to get the input from professionals and our citizens in one focused, timely process to get the design guidelines, the landscape, the signage, the lighting, all of that taken care of in one setting. And I think the other thing I wanted to say was, we do have the money. It's in the 2021, 2022 budget. It's there. And ask Jeremy after the meeting, it's true. And the last thing, and Kyle touched on it, please don't leave out Old Dixie Highway. It's very, very in need of landscaping. And to be able to show the citizens through the work that Dana and his people can do, what that corridor would look like when mature trees are there, it'll blow them away, and they'll be saying, do it tomorrow. That's how beautiful it'll look. So those are my thoughts.
Well, and I appreciate that. I've always valued, your input and stuff, and I appreciate you spending the time and taking the time to come forward and sharing your knowledge and experience and stuff that you bring to the table, and so it comes appreciated, and I want to personally thank you for doing that. We wouldn't be human if we didn't disagree on certain things and stuff, and I always respect your opinion, and likewise, I'm sure you do mine as well. But, again, I'm still not convinced. We've gotten this far without it, and we've done pretty good, and, and everybody seems to be real happy about our little gym that we've got here, so I think we're in pretty good shape just like it is, but I'm to be sold. I only cast one vote here, but I'm always up for a good sales pitch here, so that's why I'm listening.
Thank
Well,
you.
and again, as I said, I am supportive if we keep it focused right now on the commercial side, because I think that's where the greatest need is. And I think we can do it in a way.
Is that a cost concern, or is that a too broad of a scope concern?
It's both. It's both scope and cost. And I think the greatest need, and Mr. Bradford and Mr. Prince have both really talked about this, is again in these commercial areas. And I think once we establish that and we've laid that out, I think then as we go forward in the future, we can address some of the other areas. Whatever we do for landscaping in the commercial areas.
Can you identify the commercial areas for me?
Well, I think we talked about them. We talked about Bridge, we talked about Cypress, we talked about US 1, you mentioned Dixie, which I agree with. And I think we have that little section on the north side of town, what is that, Kona, or whatever that little road is up there? I think some of that is actually in Tequesta.
So are you okay if they put together a proposal for that?
I'm supportive of a proposal, again, that's got that focus.
Okay. Can I add that they also add Tequesta Park to that, and then we can decide if we want to go that direction or not, based on the cost?
Well, I think Tequesta Park is something we're gonna talk about this tonight. I think, in what sense, how would you add Tequesta Park to that?
I think we should absolutely get feedback from the residents concerning the way Tequesta Park should look like.
But do we have time, Kyle, to do that, given the time frame of the money?
I don't know that we have.
I know we're gonna get there, and we're gonna discuss it about it later, but
I don't know if we have time through the charrette process. I think we certainly can have public input and have, have opportunities for the public to come in and provide us with their thoughts. But I don't know if we go through the charrette process. We're on again, if we want to try and avail ourselves of the opportunity that we have, we'll talk more about this shortly, we kind of have a tight timeline that we're running on. Now, again, we're not talking about putting together a final plan. We're talking about a master concept that could be, that can then be modified or changed as we go forward, so.
wouldn't that be done through a charrette-like concept?
Whether it's a charrette or a public hearing or whatever you want to call it, yes.
Okay,
we could.
so we could at least have that in as a cost number, so we can decide.
Sure. Again, it's a matter of how quickly it can be done.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
See, I thought it'd be a good idea to, we all talked about it before, about doing have public input on the park.
Sure.
And I thought that's what we were gonna do.
Yeah.
We could do our own little charrette here.
Yes.
And just offer the public, come in and spend, do it on a couple of different time dates and stuff. So if it didn't work for some people on one date, then maybe they could come in for another date and open it up and let's get some input so that, if we do. But, the time frame, I believe, you're supposed to have a presentation by September, right?
An initial one, and
Right.
I think for the recreation center, we did just what's being suggested. We had multiple presentations here in the council chambers on different dates and times. We had Vince, myself, and Greg went out to various homeowners associations and various elements of the community and went out and presented, the concepts behind the recreation center and got public input. That was one of the things that resulted in the switch from what was supposed to be the original location at Remembrance Park down to Constitution Park. That was based on the public input that we received, so.
So on this first agenda, I'm just asking that Treasure Coast puts together a proposal to talk about the areas you listed. In addition, proposal A, B, to add Tequesta Park.
But they could, if we could have that as a B, and we'll see if we have time to actually execute on it.
And maybe if we, you know, yeah, just see what that cost is.
So if I can just, for a second, kind of going back to Bruce's point, started out as a kind of an architectural conversation, then we switched to landscaping, signage, then it's kind of doubled back, even with listening to a proposal from our director of planning, we doubled back and we started talking about US 1, then we talked about, well, we need to include Old Dixie, and we need to talk about Bridge Road because Tequesta Park's, or because Paradise Park's there, then we talked about Cypress, and then we've talked about Tequesta Park, and that's really the areas that are included in this conversation, which is just the areas that we just kind of summarized. So when we talk about like it's not the scope that we've discussed, I mean, I need direction, because that was the way that I understood it, is those areas are the exact same areas that we're talking about, which is the exact same areas that he just proposed that we were talking about. So if there's something in here that we don't want in that scope, I'd like to know. I mean, I know some of it he talked a little bit about, and this is part of our conversation about what we want, like as you're driving down Tequesta Drive and just the feel of the city. I mean, that's not really a new area, it's just really the feel. And so if there's an area that we don't want in here, that's the part when I start negotiating the scope with them, that we need to discuss.
Well,
If
I
there's
think we,
something that
I think we,
mentioned that I just need to know.
I think we defined the commercial areas, and then Tequesta Park would be a B, a secondary element that they would price separately as an add-on.
Okay.
May I just add a brief comment? This is Dana.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We, of course, will work close with Mr. Allen to sharpen our pencils and tighten up a proposal, but I do want to put this forward to you. Reducing the number of items on that list, Tequesta Park or not Tequesta Park, or Paradise Park or not, that's not what's costing the money. The process, having a 5-day public charrette where you've got 8 or 10 professionals committed 12, 14 hours a day on site, that's where the expenses come in. It's a human resource expense. It's not that, well, if we don't do the park, we're going to save this amount. So I just want to put that out. We can work with Mr. Allen to maybe come up with a modified charrette process, but I just wanted to point that out.
Well,
We can't help ourselves. We're going to look at all those areas again.
yeah, I guess the question is the broader the scope, does that require, more time in the charrette process? If we narrow the scope a bit, does that mean that we can be a little more efficient and a little more productive in a shorter time frame? That's a question. I don't have an answer. I'm just throwing it out as a question.
Sure. We will be as focused on the areas that you want us to be.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Dana, let me ask you a question. This is Bruce Prince. Given the geographical size of Tequesta, I mean, we're only, 2.4 square miles here? And the majority of that is consumed up of residential housing and golf courses. We have a very small area of commercial usage in the village. Could we reduce it from a 5-day to a 3-day and really bring the cost down and still achieve, given the because we don't have as much to talk about. You mentioned Lakeland, Florida. I mean, it's a pretty big city over there, and I'm very familiar with that Polk County area. They're much larger than us, and if you did a 5-day there, I mean, why couldn't we scale it down and try to conserve some of the cut some of the cost rather, and do a 3-day rather than a 5-day?
That's kind of what I was getting at. Same point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, sir. We could put that together for you. That'll be a proposal for us to work with Mr. Allen. I'll get back to the office hopefully someday and go through those numbers with Tom Lanahan.
Well, let me ask you this, Dane. I don't want to tell you how to do it because I've never actually done one. I've been exposed to one before, but is that feasible based on my justification for it because of the area? We don't have quite as much to talk about as someone in a larger city that had more geographical areas to talk about. I mean, so I've just described to you the amount of land that we actually have. I mean, can it done and be done efficiently, reducing it from 5 to 3 days?
I think so. You know, we spoke with this, Jeremy and Tom and I talked about this. You know, I am always reluctant to pare down the charrette process, just because running these things, I know that I've got all of these designers and architects, et cetera, focusing on one thing for a number of days, and so we can push out a lot of work in a short period. The shorter amount of time that we have the team together on the ground, it just means it might take a little bit longer back at the office, because we haven't built the same volume of work in such a short period of time. But your point about the scale and the context is absolutely correct. And if I may, you made a point earlier about, you know, your land development codes and your building code, et cetera. One thing that hopefully that will be produced for the village of Tequesta is that beautiful document that when an investor comes in and says, hey, who are you guys? Why should I invest here? You don't want to hand them your building code. You know, you don't want to hand them your zoning code. You want to hand them a document that's a vision with beautiful drawings showing the public input. So that's what I mean about creating momentum through the process itself. And so I'll leave you with that. We will do whatever we need to do. I wouldn't do it shorter than 3 days. There's too many inefficiencies in that, but we have other processes. We'll make it work.
Okay.
But what would be helpful though is that, and of course I don't need to hear this now, but maybe through Mr. Allen, what is the budget number that we're targeting? So we don't keep throwing paper back and forth, and then I can be efficient.
That's kind of like asking a car salesman what's the cheapest he's going to take for his car. I mean, you know what your costs are, you know what your margins of profit need to be, and you're running your business. You give us the presentation based on your cost and what you need to make to run your business.
Well, hold on a second now. If I give him 0, do we get closer to the number?
Well, he's not saying you won't negotiate it afterwards, but we have another gentleman.
Jeremy, then we've gone full circle.
We have another gentleman that would like to speak. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Owenbrink. I live at 35 River Drive in Tequesta. I'm a retired engineer principal with Kimley Horn and Associates for 41 years. And I did probably 4 or 5 different charrettes, and there is great value in the charrette process. They've done a really good job presenting this tonight, and I'm here to give you the selling points, to try to reinforce that a little bit. Probably the most important one that I did was in the early 80s. I led the charrette for the master planning of the new Palm Beach International Airport. And we didn't just look at the airport property. You know, we ended up purchasing neighborhoods. We ended up going south to the Trump property where the golf course is and all of that kind of thing. And that direction is still being followed. And that was adopted in about 1983. So that charrette was so necessary for the public input and the buy-in and the history. So, you know, I'm a no poo-pooer up here, but I think you're headed in the right direction. I think what I'm hearing from you tonight is the focus needs to stay from the railroad tracks east right now. That's what it sounds like. You have a transition commercial corridor coming down Tequesta Drive where it's going, you know, from heavy commercial into the residential. And so I think your direction to them would be more look from the railroad to everything else we have out to the east. So I encourage you to move ahead. Yes, it's an expensive process. Don't shortcut it. You're just hurting yourself if you shortcut it.
Well, let me ask you something.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'm very familiar with Kimley Horn. I do work every day with Kimley Horn, okay. So I'm very familiar with the company and stuff, and great organization, by the way. You feel like, given the size of Tequesta, I mean, we're not a Fort Lauderdale. I mean, and you know that's you know you could put Tequesta at the airport.
Absolutely.
So you
the
could
whole of Tequesta.
Exactly. I'm talking about the 2.4 miles would fit
yes,
in the airport, and you still have some space, you know, to put in a couple of sea glass projects and stuff on it.
Yep.
So. Given the size that we are, I mean, you know, you still feel like that we really need this direction and this vision to move forward. We've got like 3 or 4 parcels of land that are undeveloped here.
Yeah, there's not much.
I know, and so then we're talking about tear downs and stuff like that and moving forward and stuff, which is all coming. I mean, we'd be, fooling ourselves to say that it's not gonna happen. I mean, I want to be convinced, I'm a visionary. I want to get out there and do the right thing and stuff. I mean, you and Thomas, have y'all been clued before y'all came in here tonight?
I just think it's a very valuable process.
Yeah.
I don't think there was enough public process with the last time around with the lane delineation removal. And we got a whole new council because of that, I believe. So I think you need to involve the people.
Well, I agree with that,
You
yeah.
don't want to hear about it afterwards. You don't want to hear everybody complaining about it afterwards. You want everybody to say, man, that's a great idea. We know what's going to happen over here. We know what's going to happen on Bridge Road. It's not going to look like a bunch of concrete right up to everybody's front door. And have a direction. And the developers, it's important to them as well. So, $150,000 is a lot of money, but been there, done that. That's what it takes if they're talking about the process the way Dana explained it, and he did a very nice job.
Mm-hmm.
So, without seeing him here,
Okay.
I have to congratulate him. So, on that note, I'll sit down.
Steve, thank you. Of course, no matter what we do, we'll never have 100% people agreeing, as you well know, at the end of the process. But it's important to get that strong consensus. And again, it's that buy-in that, again, will hopefully then provide the guideposts going forward also for future councils as well. Yes?
But you're giving 100% opportunity to participate.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, absolutely, you're giving 100% opportunity. Okay, Jeremy, have you got what you need, you think, at this point?
Yeah,
More or less.
I'll build a scope, work with them. You guys
Okay.
will have an opportunity to weigh in on it still, so it won't be a done deal. You have a chance to vote on it or amend it, so we'll work on
Okay.
scope.
All right. Very good. All right, moving on to item number 2. This is the discussion. Yes, thank you both, Dana and Tom.
Thank you, Dana.
And
Thank you very much.
And thank everybody in the audience for your input, the 3 of you. Appreciate that. Okay, moving on to Tequesta Park. Mr. Allen, I'm going to let you start with the lead on this discussion.
Trying to find my agenda item, but, so the short part of this is, we had a meeting on July 15th to discuss Tequesta Park, hopefully to move forward with that plan that we could take to the state legislation, hopefully to earmark some money for Tequesta Park. In that conversation, there was, I guess some asks from staff, such as maintenance cost, letters of support, just kind of thinking because I can't find my agenda item, but the total, the scope that we were going to be asking Kimley Horn for, so we could scale a version for the package. I have included some of this information in your packet. I think you guys have the bullet points there. At this point, we're looking for, I guess, a consensus to move forward with this project. I know there's been a lot of discussion, I think, even since the July 15th workshop, so I think it was important to put it back on another workshop to try to build consensus within the council and have more discussion, because I think there was a lot left on the table at July 15th. So you have the packet in front of you. I mean, I'm open to any questions you have, but hopefully we can have discussion about the next steps in this process.
And let me add a little color from there. So, as you all know, I met with Senator Powell, talked about the circumstances with the park, the ownership and all of that. Talked to him about what we would like to do, talked about the development of a master concept. So it is not, whatever we go forward with is not locked in stone. There will be opportunities to make modifications or revisions. Now, there is a process, as Jeremy, I think, may have talked to everybody about, where we do have to go to the state. We have to make sure the state buys into any changes or modifications we want to make. We're not talking about the appropriation side now. We're just talking about the overall design of the park. But I think so far, based on conversation I had with Jeremy, they seem to be flexible to a reasonable degree, as long as the overall footprint isn't dramatically changed. Senator Powell is completely on board, The cost number I gave to him, which we all talked about last time around, was $8 million, which appears to be a fairly accurate guess on my part. And he is fully supportive of moving forward, so he would be the one who would take it forward in the Senate. Representative Snyder will take it forward for the House. I've also talked with Senator Heller's office because the park land is within her district. So since Senator Powell will take it forward, she will not be the one taking it forward in the appropriations process, but she is fully supportive of this as well. I know Jeremy's talked to JTAA, they're supportive, Jupiter is supportive. I've talked to Inlet Colony, they are on board. I know Jeremy had an initial discussion with Maria. I think she personally expressed support. I am looking to schedule a follow-up meeting with Maria. I have a follow-up meeting with Senator Powell on Friday, and I will be having a follow-up meeting with Representative Snyder next week. So what we need to come forward with is a presentation that provides, again, a master plan concept for the park that talks about what the capital investment would be on behalf of the state. Representative Snyder, as I mentioned the last time, talked about a match. I said we would not be making a match on a capital basis, but our match would be in the form of the maintenance costs that we currently incur and whatever additional costs might be incurred as we go forward. Senator Heller's office has also asked me to make a presentation to the state legislative delegation from Martin County on September 16th. She's expecting, again, unanimous support for this effort. And I'm going to talk to Senator Powell about doing something comparable for the Palm Beach legislative group. Senator Powell has talked about it, assuming we move forward with this, he would bring me up to Tallahassee to meet with the appropriation committees on the Senate side. Representative Snyder would do the same on the House. Obviously, we have to get through the legislative process. Then the House and Senate both have to vote for this. And then if we're fortunate and it stays in, it goes to Governor DeSantis. And obviously, when he signs off on the budget, we would hope he would not choose to veto this. As Senator Powell said, we take a shot at it. He fully supports going for the entire amount that we need. But as he said, if we only get 2, 3, 4 million, well, then we do what we can with that initial element, and then we can come back for more the next year. If we don't get any of it this year, he said himself, we will go after it again the following year. So he sees this as an important priority. He sees this as something that is going to be significantly benefiting both Palm Beach and Martin County residents, but as we've talked about, it's really open to anybody in the state ultimately to utilize it. I think it would be again, you all know my personal feelings on this. I think this would be a tremendous asset for the village. I think particularly with the bridge closure, which Mr. Gentile at a meeting that Molly also was listening in on referenced the fact that that bridge is going to be closed for almost 4 years by the time they start to get to the finish. That's going to have an impact on our community. I think this is something that, aside from being a tremendous facility for our residents and the residents in Southern Martin County, can also maybe help offset some of that economic impact that we would be suffering during that period of time. So again, we're talking about expending a fairly nominal sum of money, approximately $5,700 as the village manager has outlined, for the opportunity to garner what would not be a grant. This is not a grant. We're going for an earmark or an appropriation in the budget directly. I know that Councilman Brandon had expressed some concern that we're going after multiple grants. Could one have an impact on the other? That's not the case here. This is totally separate and independent from any grant applications we're going after, i.e. specifically with Paradise Park. I discussed that with Senator Powell as well, so he's aware of that. And as I mentioned, I think previously too, Senator Powell, Representative Snyder, and we have local communities that, by the way, will be supporting our grant effort as well for Paradise Park. But again, it's an independent initiative. One does not play into the other. One does not adversely affect the opportunity that's before us. The other thing I talked to Senator Powell about is trying to include a reserve component in the appropriation that we receive, so that a certain capital replacement or other costs of that nature, again, would be continued to be borne by the state, not us. So we're strictly maintenance. any capital elements would be borne by the state. That would be the ultimate objective here. So that adds a little more color to what Jeremy offered, and now it's open for discussion. Thoughts?
I mean, what are we discussing? I mean, I thought
Well, I think we want to make sure we have a consensus and we have the funds available. I mean, I've already told Jeremy he can take whatever he needs from me, from my remaining funds to underwrite the costs, I believe.
well, I told him if they were short, just to get it out of your discretion.
Well, I've offered up all my discretionary funds to him for this purpose.
You know, I mean, I thought it was pretty much unanimous last time that we were going to move forward with it. We had two that was kind of, I mean, were you out on it, Molly, or what?
I was out.
Yeah.
Last time.
Yeah, but we had a majority that we could move forward with it, though, Ryan. I mean, basically, are we here to vote on it tonight? I mean,
Well, we're just kind of reconfirming that that's the case.
So a couple things.
Yes.
Unless you want to go, I'll go.
Well, I was gonna quickly touch on that point. I mean, it was if you have a consensus, you can move forward. We didn't. We had we didn't vote on anything.
We didn't
and
vote,
so
yeah.
the idea was give discretionary funds. Well, you add up the discretionary funds that we split up originally, didn't come out to $5,700. So now if we want to move forward with discretionary funds, we gotta, everybody's gotta pledge enough to get us to $5,700.
where are we at right now?
Well, I've sent you guys your balances, but I mean, we can divvy it up and between the 3 or 4 that want to move forward, and we can try to get there.
I
But
think
with the 3, we didn't.
I think between Councilman Prince and myself, what do we have, 5,000? Close to it?
So let me help if I can. So I'm all in favor of looking into trying to get money appropriated from the state. No doubt. I've been a proponent of that we should be using Tequesta Park, we should be funding Tequesta Park, we should be maintaining Tequesta Park. I know that 3 months ago, you made a comment that, 3 or 4 months ago, that we shouldn't spend any money in Tequesta Park
No.
because we don't own it.
That's not what I said. I said
Something to that
we should not be making capital investments in Tequesta Park. The village should not be bearing the capital costs. I said as far as maintenance and all that, the operating costs were fine.
Okay.
But because that is state-owned land, not owned by us, under a lease, not restricted to Tequesta residents, we have no control in that sense, that the capital investment should come through the state.
So you're okay with the current estimate around $500,000 to
Well,
maintain it?
that would be something that, we need to, there is an estimate there for maintenance costs that would increase. Now, we don't have the corresponding increase in revenue, and again, it's an estimate. We don't know if, how exact that would be.
It would be more.
It could be more, it could be less.
Okay. Do you think the maintenance cost is going to be less after this $8 million?
No. I'm saying, I'm basing it on the estimate. I'm referring to the estimate that's in there.
But it's going to be more than what we're paying now?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Yeah, significantly more.
It could be a fair bit more, but then the revenue opportunities could be substantially more as well.
More, okay, from having
From
events?
various events and other things that we would host there.
So, again, I'm for it. I want to move forward with it, but I want to move forward it with residents' input. In the designs that we have, the most recent one that we have in the presentation today is something that we just got from someone who drew it up. It wasn't CWA. And it's a great concept. We don't know if it fits, and that's why we need money to see if it'll fit. We have another drawing that Jeremy gave to us that was taking place, 20-something years ago, maybe 15 years ago, 10 years?
10 years, 11 years
10 years ago. So we've already have somewhat of a need then. Why didn't we move forward then? And now we're here. So I love the fact, but I don't want to necessarily put any money into it until I know that the process of getting the residents' input. So that's where I need selling on. Sell me on how are we going to get the residents' input?
Okay, I would say two things. One, the concept that was developed in 2010 was nice, but it also came on the heels of the Great Recession, and nobody had any money to put to the park at that time. The village certainly didn't have those resources, and at that time, state budgets were under significant pressure. So there was no funding available at that time to undertake that initiative, even though it was a nice to. What's changed, obviously, is the economic environment, the American Care Act, the state. If you're talking with the legislators, they will tell you right now they're kind of flush with cash. So this is the time, if you want to seek out an opportunity, this is the time to pursue it. Now, I understand that the concept that we have is based on the park, in a sense, the way it is today. But again, if we're gonna try and move forward on this, and again, this is a multi-month process. We still have to go through committee, we gotta go through the votes, the legislature's got to approve it, and the governor's gonna sign it, and that's gonna happen, in February, March, April of 2022. So we have a master concept, we have time between now and then, before it comes out, before it goes to the various branches for votes, we have an opportunity to gather public input, and I would obviously encourage, and I would be more than welcome to devote whatever time and energy is necessary to garnering as much public input as we could, just like we did with the recreation center.
Well, let me ask you a question, Kyle. Are you looking for public input for the idea of moving forward with the idea, or the design of the park?
Design.
Okay. Well, here's my take on it, and I'm saying this for your benefit too, because I would really like to see you in favor of this, if at all possible. I would like to see a unanimous, vote on the council if at all possible, because I do think it's a great idea, or I wouldn't have offered to use some of my discretionary funds in order to do so. But given the fact that it can be fully funded, by the state is a huge asset in any project, whether it be this park or any type of project that we're looking at doing. And the maintenance cost of it could double from what we're spending now, or possibly even triple. And so, okay, it's going to cost us, $150,000, $200,000 a year to maintain the park. But with a redesign based on the concept that I've seen, you're going to have an opportunity for all age groups that reside here in the village to be able to utilize that park, from the children to young adults to medium age, and then old people like myself, and then even older people and stuff. There's activities there based on the concept that we're looking at for all age groups. And if we did have someone there that could help promote and manage that, the events and so forth, maybe we could offset some of the costs, but I really wouldn't go into it with the anticipation or the selling part of it that we're going to be able to offset any of the management cost of it. If we do, then great, but bottom line is we're just going to have to factor it into our budget and cough it up, and if we make a little bit of money off of it, then so be it. But I wouldn't move forward and try to tell the public that we're going to be able to offset some of the costs of maintaining this park. We don't know that. So, it's not etched in stone. If it was etched in stone, then I can look somebody in the face and honestly say that, then I would do that, but I don't think so. But bottom line is, given the fact that we could potentially pick up $8 million and create a park that people would be envious of, and our citizens would have a beautiful place of all age groups to be able to go and use, I think it's worth the money that it'll cost us to maintain it in the long run.
Completely agree with everything you said. What I'm looking for is, when will we reach out to the residents to help get a design? And to me, the solution is utilizing the charrette and saying, moving forward, that based on what we get feedback from the charrette.
Well, my thought is, so we're supposed to get an answer back when, Mayor?
I need to be able to go to them basically at the beginning of September.
So when are they going to give us an answer?
Well,
A year from now?
no, it'll go through the legislative process, so it'll go through the budgeting process. So the budgets are usually voted on by the end of February, I think. Is that, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor Abbey? Yeah, usually at the end of February, unless they have a special session.
So we have until next year.
Well, we have some time once we go with the original concept to make modifications or changes. And even after if we get the appropriation, and I think, Jeremy, you had some conversations with the state on this, once we have the appropriation in hand, even if we want to make some modifications or changes, as long as they're not dramatic, even after the appropriation, I think that could be negotiated.
No, that was with the state.
The state planning guy said that.
Not anything to do with money, it had to do with the plan itself.
Right.
Well, that
No,
I
no.
would like in writing, because in my role, if it's not in writing, it doesn't exist. So I would like to know what we can change after we were to submit a plan, because I think that's important.
To which side are we talking about? 'Cause we're talking about.
Like, say we submit a plan, what can we change after we submit it if it gets approved?
there's two parts to this. One is going through the legislative process, seeking the appropriation to get the dollars.
Correct.
The other part is the state planning agency, who will see the master concept, with whom we can then discuss making additional modifications or changes. And I know, Jeremy, you had talked to them about it, so you, whatever.
I guess I would like to know both, really. You know, once we submit this to either party, what can we change after? And I'm not against, I think 100% we have to do something in Tequesta Park. It looks awful, and I think that, I agree, you know, trying to get the appropriation. I think where I'm at is, it's hard for me to spend the money on the proposal when we haven't gotten public input, and I don't think we've seen good data on justifying like the number of fields, each type. So, and with those changes comes cost changes too. So gosh forbid we go and asking for this, but we really need this because the plan has changed. You know, I have a ton of questions on this plan. I think talking about it and public comment, we can hone in a little more, and then I would be comfortable releasing Kimley Horn to do a design. But I would hate to release them and then have to redo design, and then we're spending the same amount of money again for them to do it again.
I understand what you're asking, okay? I wish I could tell you that every question that you just asked, I can have an answer to you for, including public input in the next 60 days. I don't think that's going to be possible. I think along the lines of what Councilman Prince is saying is we're talking about spending a very nominal sum of money. If we're successful in receiving these funds, we have and again, recognizing where the state is today and the dollars that are available today, we have an opportunity to move forward with a beautiful park design. If they approve it and we come back with changes they don't like, we can just say, okay, fine, we're not going to take the money. I wouldn't advocate for that. I would sit there and say, well, if there's certain things they don't want us to change, maybe we live with them regardless, because what's going to be there when we're done is light years ahead of what's there now. So you got to look at what's there today and what could be there tomorrow. You got to look at the environment we're in and the opportunity for funding to be available.
Why can't we take photos of what it looks like today
We have those.
and put that into our presentation, be like, this is a concept, but we're going through a charrette to get the final concept?
And I said, this is a master concept. I'm not saying it's a master plan. I'm saying this is a master concept. This is the idea that we have. This is what we're moving forward with.
So I need you to tell me, when are we going to reach out to the public to get into it?
If we say we're gonna fund Kimley Horn to come up with a scale
But
design.
why do we need to do that?
Well, we need to have it in hand so that I can go to.
Why can't we just use what we already have?
Because I'm not sure that that'll fit. I mean, one of the conversations Jeremy and I had is, we don't know that that'll precisely fit at this juncture in time within the land area we have. So I don't want to go to them with something, it's one thing to go with a master concept and say, we're going to make some changes to it. It's another go with something and say, oh, by the way, we didn't spend the money or the time to make sure that what we were coming to you with was actually doable. Again, I'm looking at this as a very nominal cost. It's an opportunity, it's either one we act on or it's one we pass on. Again, in an ideal world, we probably would have started planning for this a little bit sooner, but,
I don't really think, and it's obviously just my opinion, that they're gonna really put the handcuffs on us on what we can and cannot do. I mean, if they come in here and say, well, you can't have a double wheel Ferris wheel there, but, you can have a single one and stuff. I mean, I just don't think they're gonna really get too engaged. If they're gonna give us the money, most of them are gonna go and forget about it, and they're gonna wanna be there for the ribbon cut. I mean, and then after that, it's gonna be done. They're gonna give you the money, and they wanna show up and get their picture on the, up there at the Congress or Senate or wherever they're at up there, but, and that's it. I just don't see them really telling us how to do everything. I could be, wrong. I mean, you've probably dealt more with, the state than what I have, but I just can't see them giving us too hard of a time about what we want to do there.
And I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just trying to get the council to agree to make sure that we use a process to get our residents' feedback.
Well, buddy, I'm all aboard for that. I don't see anybody squabbling over doing that, Kyle. I mean, we can set up the dates and stuff relatively soon and start advocating that and moving that down the road and stuff. I mean, that to me is just deciding on some dates and asking Jeremy to get something moving forward in that direction. I mean, I'm all about that.
Yeah, and I think I've said the same thing, whatever it takes in terms of giving the public an opportunity to come in here. If we want to set up, you know, meetings on a Saturday like we did with the recreation center during the week, we need to have some concepts to be able to present to them and show them what we're looking at.
Here's the thing about what we do at the rec center. It took over 2 years to get those ideas together, if not 3 years. And my concern is if we do it in-house, you're gonna get the same, we got to get a committee together, we got to do this, we got to do that. I think that if we utilize the charrette process based on what I've seen, it's just a add-on at very minimal cost to what we already talked about. That's going to allow us to get faster results and a faster concept so that we can implement it sooner than later. I just feel like this is gonna be blown out in, like just the rec center, it took over 2 years.
The rec center took a long time for a variety of reasons, but.
It's not easy to get impact.
We had very good impact in what I would say was a fairly compressed period of time, but.
Still 2 years plus.
I understand. It came into the council and there was a lot of discussion, and it did take an extraordinarily long period of time. Don't disagree with you. I don't think that this necessarily has to. I think, again, Jeremy can ask them to include the costs as a secondary element for a charrette on this. But again, I'm not sure that, I don't know what the time frame on that would be. But if the cost is reasonable and we all agree to it, it can happen after September 1st. But in the interim between now and then, if we have a design concept, we can go out to people and say, this is what we're looking at, put it on the website, invite people in, have a series of meetings, give people a chance to give us their input and their feedback on it. And hopefully we'll get reasonable participation if we really use our efforts to publicize this and to bring people in.
Don't we want to do that before we actually get a concept?
We have to, if you go to people with a blank page, it's not going to work. You've got to have some type of concept that you can show them and say, here's what it looks like today, here's a possibility of what we have in mind for it to look like tomorrow. Give us your feedback, give us your input. If you want to go with something completely different, that's great. But if you give people a blank page, then it will take a long time.
I'll say this, I think that we stand a lot better chance of getting more money if we go in there with a good-looking design. You go in there with a couple of black and whites and stuff and do a flyby somewhere and, you know, try to get $8 million out of somebody. They're in tone to give you $8 million if you spend 5 or 6 on getting a really professionally done design and say, that's something that I would like to have my name behind and stuff. That's something that I help, you know, give the money to for the village of Tequesta and stuff. 'Cause, you know, they like to be able to come up here and talk about it.
Sure. No, I completely agree with that.
But even when you go into the public, along the same lines, I think you've got to go to them with some kind of concept, some kind of idea as a starting point.
We've done that.
But, you know, another thing is, with your charrette idea, I'm in favor of that. I mean, like I said, you could probably add on all sorts of stuff that we could take and have the public input during that process. But we don't even know at this point if we're going to do the charrette or not.
Right.
So I'll go on record of saying that I was completely 100% support the idea of including it into that should the time allow and we move forward with that idea. And so, because I think it is a great idea to include it in there should we move forward with either one of them.
And I think if we have a concept, we get public input, depending on the time frame, we can do the charrette. Again, it doesn't have to happen before September 1. If the timing and cost factors and the decision-making on the part of the council is such, you know, maybe that takes place after September 1, and maybe that's where we come back with some modifications or changes that we can incorporate ultimately. But I know, Jeremy, you said when you talked to the state planning agency, they seemed to indicate to you that, you know, there was, I don't know, what's the right way of putting it? They weren't going to be overly stringent. Is that a fair statement? I mean,
With the planning side, it was as long as you keep the same footprint, it probably wouldn't be a problem. I mean, as long as you weren't, you know, dramatically changing what you're doing out there, which we're not in this concept. At least at this point.
do you support the charrette idea if we move forward with that?
Depending on the costs.
Sure, I mean, if we move forward with the charrette.
Yeah, yes.
For the
No.
commercial that we.
No, I agree with what Councilman Prince says. I'm fine with that, but I don't think we should wait on that. I think if we decide we're gonna move forward, do a scale design so that we have a good concept we can go to the legislature with. I think we do some public meetings in advance. But again, we're on a very short time frame because September 1 is only 4 weeks away.
So if they go to budget in February of next year,
Well, it starts in committee in September. So the first meetings will be in committee. That's where Senator Paul and Representative Snyder will come forward and propose an $8 million earmark for this project. And I will have the package in their hands, and I will be up there to meet with the committees as well.
well, answer me this, right?
I think we have a better opportunity of getting the state support if we can show the state we're getting this feedback from the residents. And we can tell them we have hired the transportation authority.
I think what the state's gonna wanna see is,
And hold on a second, and if for some reason they don't give it to us this year, we go again next year. And we've got the design and the drawings based on what the residents have said.
But I will say this, they are flush with cash.
Well, I know that.
And so now's the time to go and get that free money, you know, and
But-
get it now. But the bottom line is, guys, we got plenty of time. The reason why I was asking, when do they, if we took it to them and in February they agreed, when would we actually get the money?
okay, so, again, the committee process is where this begins, okay? That begins in September, okay?
I got that part.
Okay,
I wanna know
so-
when they're gonna write the
okay.
check, right?
Well,
That's
right,
what
that,
I'm talking
once,
about.
once the budget's approved, you know, and the governor signs it, then you're in a position for the monies to be dispensed. Now, the exact particulars as to exactly when those dollars would be dispensed, I can't tell you for sure. I would think they'd happen relatively quickly, but again, we need to be able to go into the committee meetings with a concept. I keep saying this over and over again. We've got to have a good, strong concept that we can go forward with. We can always modify it. If we do the charrette in September or October, and we want to make some modifications, we can. But I've got 4 weeks to put a package together that I can take to Powell and Snyder and take into committee in September. So again, if this was 3 months ago, some of the questions, some of the issues that are being raised, we would have time to address them. What I don't want to do is lose the opportunity in the current environment to seek out these funds and seek approval. And I think Councilman Prince makes a good point. If they approve it, if we're fortunate enough that they approve it, I don't think they're going to quibble over some reasonable design changes. As he said, they're going to be happy to come down here for the ribbon cutting when this thing all opens up, and they can all say we were behind it.
But we're not building it for them, right? We're building it for our residents in the area, community.
Again, this is,
Right?
I'm going
And
to say
that's
this.
what I'm focused on.
I know, but again, this is not just, again, you're thinking this is Tequesta only. It's not.
Trust me, I've sat on boards with JTAA, I understand what's
Okay,
going on.
but it's JTA, it's Southern Martin County, it's state land, it's open to anybody.
And they're gonna help us maintain it.
No, they're gonna help us.
And I know that, so it is, we're gonna be the ones taking.
We're gonna maintain
the
it,
maintenance.
and we're going to be the primary beneficiaries of it, okay?
But now you're selling it for everybody else. I hear you.
We're, again, this is a unique situation. It's state-owned land, it's Martin County, it's Village of Tequesta. We're gonna be the primary beneficiaries, but again, it's not exclusive to us. Our match is the maintenance. We're asking them for the capital investment.
I think on usage, I'm still not clear on that. So there's a letter from JTA, and it's like a handful of events throughout the year, right? It's not a lot. And then we got some information from Jupiter on the usage at Jupiter Community Park, but not the rest of the park. So what I was looking for, so we can make an educated decision on, you know, the number of fields we need in the usage is, you know, are the parks in Jupiter, are they ever overbooked? Is there a need for
Yes.
that, right? So I just want to see that data. No one's provided that. So that's why if I can't see that, I can't see the need for this and the use for this, because there is need. Those parks are overbooked. We need this. Is this approximately how many fields, you know, our community and the area would benefit? That hasn't been laid out. So that's why I'm really hung up on.
I know some of those details are missing, and like I said, because of the time frame we're in, I agree with you. Under normal circumstances, it would be great to have all that information. We don't. So it's very simple. We got 4 weeks to put a package together that we can go to the state legislature with and ask for $8 million. Okay, is it worth $5,700 to advance this cause? At the end of the day, if they give us $8 million and we don't want it, we can say no, okay? But the bottom line is, I don't think we would. And again, when you look at what's there now, it's an eyesore. I mean, it's an embarrassment, to be quite honest. And we're talking about building a tremendous facility, and as Councilman Prince said, it's gonna benefit everybody in this community. So.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the selling it, and then the proposal of sports tourism, they didn't really talk about our community, like the Tequesta, Village of Tequesta, and the sports tourism, I think it's great, because I absolutely think you'll bring business into the businesses, but there's no hotels here, so you could also maybe think that they're gonna go to their hotel and eat in the location that the hotel's at, and not here. So I don't wanna use that as the only selling point, which is kind of looks like as well.
No, I agree. That is not the only selling point. I think it's like when Jupiter Hills brought in the four-ball tournament, did we benefit, did our local restaurants benefit, did our businesses benefit through those kinds of activities? The answer is yes. You're right. We don't have any hotels within our boundaries, but people still come in here and spend money and help support our local businesses. So, there's a multitude of benefits that flow from this. Part of it is business. Part of it is having the recreational facilities available to everyone. Part of it is not having to have parents always driving their kids somewhere else. They'd actually have some of these activities located right here in Tequesta. Whether it's, soccer or lacrosse or whatever else. They don't always have to go into Jupiter. Sometimes people, we have people coming here.
Molly, the number that really sticks into my mind that I was actually absolutely astounded by is when Jeremy said that we had 1,500 people that are currently using the facility that is there now, a month. 1,500, I would have never have guessed that in my wildest dreams that 1,500 people are actually going over there at the facility that exists now every month on an average, 1,500 people. Now, whether it has any economical impact to the restaurants or the gas stations or whatever, the people that use that facility that come in from out of town, I think it'll be minimal. I don't think that we're going to see a real economic impact, that it's going to have a huge impact on our restaurants and things like that here. I think that they'll get some usage out of it. It's just natural, but I wouldn't count on it. I'm not in favor of it because of that.
Well, that's what our proposal says on the agenda.
Well, I'm not even. I don't even care what the proposal says. I'm more interested in the people of the village of Tequesta using it.
The reason I'm going to disagree with that, I've taken my son to his baseball practice out at Jupiter Farms and getting done at 8:30 at night because there's not enough fields. We stop by McDonald's there or whatever and grab a bite to eat on the way home.
Well, I'm saying.
That's gonna happen.
Yeah, well, I know that, but I'm not using it as a selling point. I'm saying, sure, it's going to happen some. Absolutely, we're going to see some. But even if you took all of that away from it, the attributes of having that available to our citizens of the village of Tequesta for no other reason is worth it, in my opinion. With the average age, I think, again, is 47 in here. There's a lot of kids here in the village of
Tremendous
Tequesta.
number of kids.
But there's also people, my age that would go over there and use the pickleball courts and stuff, the tennis courts and stuff, and there's a lot of other things and activities that every age group, like I said earlier, are going to be able to use this park.
Yeah. Well, and as we talked about before, we do not have the capital resources available to invest in this park. We just don't. We've got the recreation center, which is going to be a fantastic facility. That is something, obviously, that was a village undertaking and should have been a village undertaking, but we don't have the resources to turn this into what it needs to be. And again, I think we're all saying, we're kind of starting to talk in circles here a little bit.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I'm all for it. I
So-
just want to make sure we get the rest
Well, what
of
we
this.
could do is do the hook and switch. We could hook them on the money, and we could take them, go up there and pay $4 million to Paradise Park, and turn around and spend another $4 million and go in there and build some.
Well, Paradise Park, we're going to try and do through the grant process, but no, I think it's very simple. $5,700 to create an opportunity to get $8 million of funding to build a beautiful park. That's really what we're asking for right now is, can we agree that it's worth that minimal investment to create this opportunity? And and then again, I don't disagree with the public input. We'll do what we can in the next 4 weeks. But if we do the charrette afterwards and make a modification, we can do that.
I don't think it's necessary to have the public input in the next 4 weeks. I think it's important that we have it.
Oh,
prior to
agreed.
building it.
Agreed. I'm not, I don't think anybody's
Hundred
disagreeing
percent, I don't think
with that.
anybody's disagreeing with you on
No,
that.
I think we're all in agreement on that.
I just want, there's some, I have a lot of questions and things that could potentially change that could impact the estimate too, so that's why I want to make sure we think it through. Some public have told me, we'd like a splash pad there for our kids, do we need an escape park? What about the volleyball courts? Should we consider like artificial turf instead of regular turf so we're not, putting the pesticides down and, fertilizer down?
So I think-
And then, do we need a traffic study, or is County Line gonna have to be changed at all for the increased traffic? And those all could affect the budget, so I wanna make sure we're, like I said, thinking this through and submitting as accurate budget as we can.
And I, again, I completely agree with you, and I think we'll have an opportunity to do that over the next few months, is to fine tune some of those elements. I mean, we have $350,000 for sod. If we decide we want to do artificial turf and save the money that's associated with that, I don't know what the cost of artificial turf would be. Jeremy's
really
saying-
expensive,
Jeremy's saying it'd be a
yeah,
lot
that's-
higher.
You'll
But,
see it
I
in
mean-
irrigation, but it's very expensive. Audio visual, what, I didn't see anything in the budget for that. Is any other infrastructure need to be upgraded? I see some gaps, and I just wanna make sure too, if we're going, we're thinking through the plan, and we're submitting a really, the best construction cost that we can, and make sure we're not missing anything.
And so just so, I agree with you, and I do think, obviously, we're gonna miss something because we're rushing, right? And so that's why I think it's important we do that planning and that charrette side of things. We might come up with a design that's $10 million, and we can only do 8 now because we happen to get 8. And so then it means, we can go back the next year and ask for another.
Well,
So that's what I really wanna make sure that we get this
Yeah.
planning done.
No, I don't think anybody's disagreeing, and we can go back for more if we need it. But again, given the current environment we're in, this is a very opportune time to take this forward.
If it's a good idea and it's something that is needed, then it will eventually be approved by the state.
Depending on what resources they have available.
If it's a good idea, then it makes sense, and that, we have to present that.
Agreed, but again, it also, there's a lot of good ideas that get vetoed out of the state budget or don't get into the state budget simply because of, resource constraints,
I
so.
think we have a comment.
Mayor Abby,
I have not put in a card, so I apologize.
That's okay.
All
Keep
for
your
this
3 minutes, Ann.
opportunity. I think I'm enjoying all of the conversation. There's a lot to it, but I think we might be overthinking it right now. If the state of Florida today is, let me go back even further. First of all, Mayor, unbelievable job to get as far as you have. I know what it's been like to go and talk to these people, to pull this off, and to get to Senator Powell, and to get to Representative John, and of course Gail Harrell, and whatever. Right there, that is a huge deal, and I just want to tell
Thank
you
you.
that, and think that's amazing. I think that for, what are we talking, $5,800?
5,700.
57. I think there's money left over from my discretionary fund, actually, from, when I moved on. But if you have the opportunity to just have a bigger plan, and you want to just say, okay, this is what we have right now. I agree with you, Councilmember. The way it is now looks wonderful. But let's just say you want to change all that. Okay, that's down the road. I agree that you would be best served to pay this money to get a rendering that is going to be to scale and be better represented, and go for it now, because that money with the state will not be there next year. We do not know what's going to be there next year. To have these people in line, like Frank has done, is a big deal. To be able to, and what he said, the governor could veto it. We don't know if it's going to go through the House or the Senate, but even more than that, you can say we don't want it. If you really get down to this and everybody wants to change it and it doesn't look like it's going to work properly, then you cannot take the funds. But to just get this started and moving forward with the people that have been lined up, I think really is to everybody's benefit. Yes, you have to think about operating. Yes, you have to think about how many people, the rate of return we're going to receive, and all of those things. But honestly, for this amount of money to be able to move it forward at the legislative level that Frank has gotten it to at this point, I think it's really, really a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
We You have a comment?
Yes,
You ready?
Councilwoman Brandon sent in an email, so Lori's going to read this into the record for us.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. While I unfortunately cannot be there tonight, I do want to communicate to all of you where I stand at this time regarding Tequesta Park. Mayor, if you recall from our special meeting a few weeks ago, I had asked you how official the park design had to be for Senator Powell and Representative Snyder to be able to support it and send it up the chain for possible approval of funds to enhance the state's park of which they own. You communicated that we would be able to make changes to the park design later in time if need be, but that we have to decide by September if we want to ask them for their support. Otherwise, we would have to wait until September of 2022. I asked twice in that meeting for how official the design had to be. I was hesitant then and I am hesitant now. In my opinion, I don't see how a senator would support a park design that has a possible price tag of almost $8 million without knowing the park design is set to go by having the details worked out, such as environmental concerns answered, future maintenance costs for a more actively used park, and most importantly, having the community support on a final design. I do not wish to spend money twice by doing a scaled version of the draft design we have currently, and then later possibly changing a few things and having to do a second scaled version. If we as council do the proper vetting process right now in Tequesta Park, it would include getting a scaled version of the design that has been designed thoroughly, much like we did with our new community center, and we won't have to pay for it twice. I do think we need the state's help financially to clean up Tequesta Park, especially since they own it. I do not think we are at the point yet of being ready to vote on the draft design at hand. We have too many strings hanging that need to be tied up to complete the package to send to them. If we do this correctly, we will eliminate most of the possible objections that our higher government officials may have, and in turn have a stronger possibility of getting the funding. Let's also please not forget that we are asking the state for grants, for many grants, for other projects in the village. We as a council should be making sure that any project funding that we ask from them has been vetted and completely thought out to make a stronger presentation and better chances of getting some funding approved. Everybody is always asking them for funding, so why not make sure that we, as a small village, show them how serious we are for needing the help by being fully prepared. Let's stand out from the others and show them why they should invest in the village of Tequesta. Thank you. That is my 2 cents.
Okay.
Lori Brandon.
As I mentioned, she mentions the grant funding, but again, the grant and the appropriations process are completely separate. And again, as I said to you, Molly, if under ideal circumstances, if we'd started earlier, we'd have some more of the detail, but I think we have time to work through that simultaneously while we're working with the representatives to try and get this approval. So, again, I think it's a nominal cost. I think it creates a tremendous opportunity for us. And obviously, you know where I stand. I think it's one we should pursue. Mr. Bradford?
Yes, sir. Just a couple of points. I think Kyle is right on about public comment. You all probably know this, but I want to reiterate it. The Division of State Lands is part of FDEP, and they are big on public input, very, very big, and I'm glad to hear that you all are for that. But you got to give it a lot of thought, because they're going to send down somebody from Tallahassee. They'll probably send somebody to these public meetings that you have for input. And it's got to be well planned, because I've dealt with them before, particularly on beach renourishment projects and so forth. And they're going to take copious notes, and they're going to look into all of it in a great detail. And and I would be very, very careful about using SurveyMonkey or anything like that. But you've got to have a process that you've thought out very deeply in that regard. The other thing I wanted to mention was, I think you're going to find this surprising. I recently set up a cost allocation formula at the request of Jeremy for a totally different project. And for zip code 33469, 37% of the population lives in Martin County, and 31% lives in the village of Tequesta. So we may not be the biggest user. I'm gonna go on a limb and say we probably have more younger people, but they've got more head count than we do. And so I would say to that please make contact with that district commissioner of Southern Martin County, because he or she, I have no idea who it is, for the Martin County Commission would probably also be an asset to have on your side. And going back to the public comment, I remember what I failed to tell you. I think that's one of the biggest complaints I've heard out there is, when are we going to have our input? Nobody's ever asked us. Some people think splash pads are great, others think it's the crazy side. Eliminate all that. Just have the public hearing, make sure you've thought it through, and it should all work itself out. Those my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Reichert. The village manager, I know, has reached out to Martin County, and I know Representative Snyder is reaching out to the district commissioner as well. So I believe we are going to have Martin County support, for this initiative as well.
Well, if that's the case, then maybe they ought to help with some of the maintenance costs.
That's right.
I mean, I
Well-
didn't realize that, I appreciate you pointing that out. If that's the case, and they have a bigger dog in the hunt as we do, then they need to start buying some dog food.
Jeremy, you want to
Can I
comment
have
on
a-
that?
This will give me a chance to plug our hysterical committee. They have very good notes going all the way back to '73 when we started subleasing this facility from the Kiwanians Club. Since the beginning of days, we've been asking Martin County and the state for funds. Martin County at some point, I think it was in the '90s, had told us that they'll be more than happy to help us with maintenance of the cost of the thing, but it's all or nothing. They either want it and they'll do it, or we'll do it, but they won't split the cost with us.
Well, let them do it then.
Well, they could, but I think, again, the question is, it's a matter of, do we value having control of this park for our, for our purposes?
For our comprehensive plan and
And comprehensive plan?
This is getting better.
I don't know. I mean, I honestly don't care really who's got control of it or not, and we still get the usage of it. That's the whole idea behind it. I don't need an ego. We got control of it. I mean, if they want to go in there and take over the maintenance of it and save us the expense, let them have at it.
$500,000 a year and we get an $8 million park? Let's
Yeah,
go.
they can put their name on it.
Well, that was a position they took many years ago.
Let's find out.
I am open to having a conversation.
Well, that was 30 years ago.
Pardon?
You said 1990?
It was back in the 1990s.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
I'm more than open to having a conversation about the idea of sharing the maintenance
Well, I
element.
certainly would, given the
And we'll
fact
see what
that
happens with
the
that.
percentage that he just pointed out. I was totally unaware of that, 100%.
What makes up the other 36%? Unincorporated in Jupiter?
And Jupiter, those two.
So, okay, so, again, I'm in favor of expending the money with Kimberly Horn to do the drawing. Bruce, I think you are as well. Kyle, Molly, where are you guys seeing it? Oh, I'm sorry.
Just comments.
You have some more? Okay.
I'm sorry. Hello again. Well, if what I'm hearing is correct, you had the opportunity to put forth a $5,700 something rendering.
Yeah, from our discretionary
Right,
council
to go
funds.
after this 8 million approximately from the state. It kind of sounds too good to be true, but does that mean the state is not going to control telling you what you're going to have in that park? Is that my understanding?
Jeremy talked to the state planning agency, and I think they kind of indicated that, we do need to submit to them something that shows, how we're going to be utilizing it. But I have the impression, Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong, that, they're pretty reasonable in responding to what we would put forth, as long as, again, we're not making huge or dramatic changes to the footprint of the park.
Okay, well, as you all are all aware of the situation with that park being owned by the state, located in Martin County, and we lease, that it's always been the talk. Well, don't saddle our residents with the cost of doing
Correct.
much in there, and so I'm glad to hear the capital is going to be held elsewhere. We have the unknown out there of what will be our operating costs with such a big facility going forward, and that would be a little bit of a concern, and I think that's the questions you're going to get from the public. I don't see how you have the time frame here or capacity to do much community input before you have to make your presentation.
We
But
can-
I agree with you, Vice Mayor, you do, at any opportunity, as we've all learned, need to get to the public as much as possible. But as you know, and we've been through this many times with US 1, before that with the bridge, which was much more successful in reception. But it takes a lot to get them to come and to participate. And then you're always going to have the ones come after the fact, you never told me, you never did this or that or the other. Perhaps there's a way, though, early on now, just to generate through communities. What's your feeling about Tequesta Park? Whatever, just so you kind of have a background before you get into any modifications you might want to make, to hear something, you know, to get that door open somehow, or even have Saturday meetings, whatever it is. But if it is true that you have the opportunity to spend that little amount of money for the chance to get this 8 million, and you can kind of work out the details later, then it seems like a reasonable thing to do.
Well, as Mayor Brennan said too, and I've said this, is at the end of the day, if we don't want it, you know, if the community comes back and says, no, we're happy with Tequesta Park the way it is, we don't have to take it. And all we've spent is $5,700. But if we don't spend the $5,700 and take a shot at it, again, as we've all talked about, the current budget situation is one that is favorable at this point in time. And again, Vice Mayor, even though you said, well, if it's a good idea, they'll do it later, not necessarily. Again, it's budget constraints and the financial situation can change. If we go into a recession, if something happens, you know, it could be years before we have another opportunity like this to be able to try and procure these funds. So that's why I think, again, to your point, Molly, some of the details I would like fleshed out better myself. I tend to be more aligned like you are in that regard, but this is just one of those circumstances where I guess we're gonna have to have a little faith, and we need to make a determination as a council. That's what we're elected for, if we want to take a shot at this, and I think it's a shot well worth taking.
Well, do we need to vote on this?
Can't vote on it.
Can't vote, but we can have a consensus, or we can, if three of us say,
Okay.
provide him with the necessary funds, he can.
Well, I mean, I've already told you what I'd give you. I mean, so do we have enough discretionary funds now? I mean, how much are you short?
If only 3 of you guys agree, you need $1,900. If 4 of you guys agree, you need $1,400.
Well, I think you have
And
20
you guys all have enough, the 3 of you guys that have agreed to it prior.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think Bruce and I together, what do we have? I think 5,000?
No.
I think I gave $200 to the butterfly deal one time.
We're close to that, though, I
It
think.
was 500.
500, I amped it up a little bit so they could get some irrigation going over there for them butterflies.
I'm still not clear, and I'm sorry, I'm just hung up on this. I'm just nervous committing and sending this in, not knowing for sure. Like, I'm not clear on what we're capable of changing after it's submitted.
I don't.
Can we change anything? That's where I'm hung up.
We can.
'Cause I don't wanna commit to this plan.
We can go back and make whatever changes we would like. It would go to the state planning, they would have to review it and say yea or nay to whatever changes we would propose. And as far as, the state legislature goes, if we make any changes, I will go back up and I will tell them, okay, this is what we presented, or the changes we've made. Again, to Bruce's point, I don't think they're gonna care a whole lot about the utilization as long as it's, they can see the benefit, for the residents of the state and the communities that this park is gonna serve. I could be wrong on that, but I don't think they're gonna get into the micromanagement of this.
I completely agree with you, and I'm not hesitant to help support this. Again, as long as, and you guys mentioned that you will support the idea of the charrette, community
Yep.
feedback. I think that is vital, and I also think it's important that when we present this, that we let the state know that here is our initial council concept.
Right,
We are
and I will
now,
do that.
here's our steps, 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
How to get our feedback from the residents to confirm that this concept.
Well, you could submit it kind of a very good point in the way you're orchestrating the presentation is the fact that, this is all, this is a preliminary design, but it's going to be predicated on, residents' input as we progress through this thing. Yeah,
I want to see that, I'm good.
yeah.
Right, and Jeremy and I talked about that, and I said I would go forward with this as a master concept that the council is putting forth. I would not back us into a corner. and say, it's a master plan and it's definitive. I would let people know that, there could be some modifications forthcoming, but conceptually, this is the idea we're moving forward with, and this is what we're asking, for the money to support. Again, with the realization there could be some changes forthcoming as we go forward, as we get, additional community input into the process.
There will be changes.
Yeah,
Not, yeah, like
absolutely.
100% will be changes to this plan.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. That there are changes, and nothing the state's gonna.
Yeah.
No, you don't have anything else to spend your money on, you might as well go ahead and spend it now.
No, there's other things that are important to me that I want to spend my money
You're not
on.
getting any interest on it or anything, go ahead and cut it loose, let's get this thing done, move on.
So,
I have other things
I'm
that are important
tired.
to me.
so,
I'm willing to commit $1,900.
Yeah,
and I'm in.
yeah.
Bruce is in.
We got at least 3.
Okay. All right. I think we beat the dead horse, so to speak. But it was worth it. It was a good conversation.
Based
and
on my concept that I mentioned earlier.
Yes, we're agreeing to that. Yes, we're going to get the public input. Anything else that any other members of the council would like to bring up this evening?
I'm afraid to say anything else, we'll be here for another 30 minutes talking about it.
Okay. I just have one item. We do have the appraisal for Paradise Park. Jeremy and I have spoken, and we're going to be setting up a meeting to meet with Betsy Molino, who's the owner, later this week to discuss the appraisal with her. We'll see how she responds. I know she does want to sell the property. She has indicated to me in multiple conversations she would like to see the village be the acquirer. Her words to me is, I'm just looking for a fair price. The question, but I've also explained to her that our ability to acquire this property would be based on receipt of the grant to underwrite the cost, and that we will not have that grant approval until sometime next year. So I've communicated that to her. She has indicated some willingness perhaps to extend the lease, but again, she wants to know we're very serious about acquiring the property. So we'll meet and discuss this with her on Friday, I believe is like the likely date. And then we will get back to all of you at the next council meeting as to the outcome of that discussion.
If someone else will buy it for us, I'm great.
Well, again, that's where the grant comes in. We're looking for that grant money to help underwrite that cost, obviously. Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved to
adjourn.
adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the compliment. It's needed.
Yeah, you gotta break it up a little. I don't know.